Feeling anxious and having panic attacks, but you don't know why? Could be perimenopause. Stay tuned and find out how. Hello and welcome to this growing community of people who are ready to heal from weird mystery symptoms that conventional medicine doesn't have answers for. I'm Carrie Bailey, your functional nutritionist. I work with people with anxiety, depression, and other weird mystery symptoms. And together we heal with specific therapeutic foods, supplements, and herbs. I encourage you to follow your own inner knowing, your own inner guidance system with the information that I provide, because the information I provide is general in nature and may not be specific to you. Perimenopause is what seems to be hormonal changes that are happening usually about 10 years before menopause, so sometime in your 40s, although more and more recently, we're seeing women as young as their mid-30s struggling with perimenopause symptoms. This could be that your period has gone wonky. Maybe your cycle is irregular, or you're skipping periods, or your bleeding is more heavy or more light, just weird shifts from what it was earlier in your life. You might have low libido, vaginal dryness. You might notice that your skin overall is more dry. And you might be noticing mood changes like anxiety, depression, and panic attacks. You might also be struggling with fatigue, frequent urination, and increased muscle pain and joint pain. Stiffness, like when you wake up in the morning. Here's a symptom I want to call out specifically, which is night sweats and hot flashes. The interesting thing is that I see more and more men who are struggling with night sweats and hot flashes as well, but we don't call that perimenopause. So think about that for a minute, and we're going to talk about that later in the video. We look at the history of perimenopause and menopause, and if you were to ask your great-grandmas and your great-great-grandmas and your great-great aunties like about menopause, they would say, we didn't have that. I don't know what you're talking about. Really, it's because perimenopause didn't come about really until the 1900s, more specifically in the 1940s. So this would have also coincided with the Industrial Revolution, also the end of World War II, where the women were having to do so much work while the men were gone, and then so they got really, really tired, so they were having more caffeine. This was the big increase in the daily coffee habit. And there was also the production of hormone disrupting chemicals like DDT. DDT was our first synthetic insecticide. It was developed in the 40s. Unfortunately, DDT is very toxic to our liver and our nervous system. So in 1972, they banned DDT. Well, the problem is that it's still in our environment. We're still exposed to it. When they test like the cord blood of babies, they're still finding chemicals like DDT in there, even though it's banned many, many years ago. So DDT is still prevalent in our environment, and it's still out there disrupting our hormones. And DDT is just one of many hormone disrupting toxins that are out there that we're exposed to. All kinds of plastics, whether we're touching them, they get exposed to our body, drinking out of bottled water and using more and more plastics. We're being exposed to these hormone disrupting chemicals. Let's first talk about our adrenal hormones. So our adrenals are these little teeny glands that are about the size of a walnut that sit on top of your kidneys. So they hit you about mid-back, like right where the bottom of your ribs. And these glands are responsible for releasing adrenaline and cortisol. And in order to pretty much do anything in life, you need some adrenaline, right? In order to stand up and things like that. And so adrenaline is very important, and so is cortisol. Cortisol's role is to help dampen inflammation, and adrenaline, when you're under a lot of stress, adrenaline will come in and help you run from the lion. But unfortunately, we have more and more adrenaline released on a daily basis because we are living in a very stressful environment. The problem with adrenaline and cortisol is you can have too little and you can have too much. So always with our hormone, we want the balance, right? If our body's in balance, our hormones will be in balance. Too much adrenaline can deplete our neurochemicals. And there's a mix of a lot of different neurochemicals beyond neurotransmitters that help us and keep our mood happy and even. Excess adrenaline can definitely give you that feeling of anxiety. If you have excess adrenaline for a long period of time, later on down the road, you could be struggling with depression. Excess cortisol, which is released at the same time as adrenaline is released, It's hugely burdensome on our liver, our central nervous system, and our brain. But on the opposite side, too little cortisol can wreak havoc on your thyroid. It can negatively affect your thyroid function, right? Because if there's inflammation here, your thyroid isn't going to work so well. So we need, again, that Goldilocks balance. If you're interested in learning more about adrenal fatigue, check out this video here where I talked about adrenal fatigue. Let's get into some other hormones that are important in the whole perimenopause picture, and those are thyroid hormones. Now, your thyroid hormones may be generally too low. Sometimes they can be too high. But either way, what's causing that is Epstein-Barr virus. And what it can do is that virus can get into your thyroid and attack the tissues and damage the tissues and prevent it from functioning optimally, meaning it's not able to release enough T3 and T4 in order to keep you balanced. Thyroid hormone imbalance can cause things like body temperature fluctuations. You might feel too hot, you might feel too cold, you might have fatigue, or listlessness, which is really the motivation to do nothing, which could sort of look like depression. So it's important to understand that the listlessness and depression are a little bit different, but they could look like bedfellows. The last symptom of a low thyroid is dry skin. You might notice that I didn't say weight gain and some of the other symptoms that are usually contributed to thyroid, because again, it's a very complex system. Is it your adrenals? Is it your thyroid? Is it your sex hormones? Because they all work together, and when one's off, they're likely all off. More and more today, I see not only conventional medicine, but also even integrative and functional medicine prescribing some type of hormone replacement. Now, there's two types of hormone replacement. There's regular hormone replacement and there's bioidentical. So let's talk about those a little bit. So your regular hormone replacement is going to use a prescription synthetic hormone like Premarin, which is made from, horse urine, right? That's the one that you know of that kind of has the damaging effects. It could cause strokes and cancers. And so you want to be really careful with the regular hormone replacement therapy. Now, bioidentical is still a steroid, is using a steroid to help you balance your hormones. The problem is that steroids, what they do is they're actually suppressing your immune system and thereby suppressing your symptoms. So this is a Band-Aid, it's kind of a cover-up, it's kind of a disguise. You're not actually getting at the root cause. You might feel better temporarily, but in the long term, you're going to not want to suppress your immune system because you want your immune system to fight the viruses and other things that are throwing off your hormones. Bioidentical hormones is a steroid hormone that's very similar to the hormone that your adrenal glands produce. And as I said, it might make you feel better, but in the long run, it's suppressing your immune system. So it's important to understand that so that you can feed your immune system so that you can get to the underlying root cause and address that instead. Let's get into the causes of what's really messing up your hormones and leading to perimenopause. And those are viruses and heavy metals, among other things. So we talked a little bit about the Epstein-Barr virus. It can be other viruses that you acquired throughout your lifetime, right? Were you exposed to shingles or chickenpox or measles or mumps? There's a lot of viruses out there. There's hundreds of viruses that we're exposed to, including the flu virus, right? So those viruses, they get in our body, and as long as we're healthy and we're managing stress and things like that, we can keep them low and small and not grow, right? But it's in those episodes where you have some kind of triggering event, some kind of stress and trauma that causes those viruses to awaken and start attacking your immune system. Let's talk a little bit about heavy metals. I've talked about heavy metals before, but more specifically mercury and aluminum. So if I can talk a little bit about aluminum, understanding where it is in the environment so that you can stop exposing yourself to it. And that is, it's graduation season here, and I notice that there's a lot of parties, and at those parties they're having a lot of trendy sodas, and those trendy sodas are in aluminum cans, as well as hard kombuchas and ciders and different drinks, even a lot more beers I'm seeing in cans. And so just be cognizant of when you're drinking those things, and even canned tomatoes, all those canned foods you're getting aluminum in your body when you eat them. When you touch them, that aluminum can get onto your hands. It can get into your body. When you're consuming the food that comes in aluminum. We've started talking about some of the causes of perimenopause symptoms. We talked about viruses, and specifically we're talking about viruses because they attack your nervous system. And attacking the nervous system, this is what triggers the anxiety, the panic attacks, and it starts interfering with your neurotransmitters and their ability to do their job. And so things go a little bit haywire, and next thing you know, your nervous system's off kilter. And so it's important to understand that that is one major root cause of perimenopause. You can also have nutrient deficiencies, so the B vitamins are really important, and so if you're not getting those enough through your food, and if you're not supplementing, you're going to need those in order for you to methylate. And methylation is what helps you make hormones and break down and get rid of hormones. And so that process that happens like a billion times a second in your body needs to be working optimally in order for your hormones to work optimally. We talked a little bit earlier about caffeine. So excess caffeine in the form of coffee, even green tea and matcha tea all have caffeine. Even decaffeinated coffee has caffeine. And so it's important to understand caffeine, also chocolate, and then it can be in any kind of sports drink. So it's important to understand all of your sources of caffeine so that you can minimize it, ideally. What is your diet like? If you have an unsupportive diet, meaning too much processed food, too much fast food, too much fat, we'll talk about some other dietary things in a bit, but if you have an unsupportive diet, then that can lead to hormonal imbalance as well. We talked a little bit about this earlier, which is heavy metals, so toxic heavy metals. But remember earlier when we talked about hot flashes and night sweats? Heavy metals is the true cause of hot flashes and night sweats. And again, going back to the fact that it's not just women that experience this, it's men as well. And so this is your body's way of trying to get those toxins out, right? It's heating things up. It wants to get rid of those toxins in your body. Toxins, these heavy metals, are not only causing the hot sweat, night sweats, and hot flashes, but also the anxiety and panic attacks. Lastly, we want to watch out for consumption of any hormone disrupting chemicals. Again, that can be plastics that you're eating from, touching. These can be hormone disrupting chemicals in your personal care products. This can be fragrances in your scented candles, in your laundry detergent. It's important to have an awareness of where these hormone disruption chemical exposures are so that you can reduce them as best you can. Now, there's certain things that we can't avoid in our environment, right? They're in the air, they're in our food. If we eat in a restaurant, we don't have that much control, but whatever you can do at home is the best way to mitigate the hormone disrupting chemicals. Let's talk a little bit about testing. I hear a lot of people, they want to do tests for hormones and see what's going on, and they can do a saliva test, a blood test, or a urine test. The problem with these tests is they're actually skewed because of the inflammation, because of the underlying root causes of what's going on in the body. So you're not really getting a true picture of what the hormones really are doing. You're looking at for symptoms, but the tests don't always equate to what you're seeing in the hormones levels. I used to run these tests a lot in my practice, and I used to use things like DHEA and pregnenolone and progesterone in order to help women balance their hormones. But there was a couple problems with using DHEA, pregnenolone, and progesterone in my practice, and that was that they contained alcohol. And I noticed that was really hard on the liver. And alcohol is one of those things that I'm always trying to get people to remove in order to heal. I also noticed that these DHEA and pregnenolone were more like a Band-Aid. They weren't actually solving the underlying root cause because, again, these are steroids, so it was making them feel better, but it wasn't resolving the underlying root cause, which, again, are viruses and toxins. And so it might be something that you need to do initially, again, as long as you're using it as a Band-Aid, but the problem, again, is trying to find the right source of pregnenolone and DHEA that is not alcohol-based. And lastly, about testing, so we've got the Dutch test. And the Dutch test is a popular functional medicine test to test your hormones. It uses urine, dried urine, in order to get the test. In the past, I've used saliva tests and things like that. But it's really hard to get the most accurate reading with those tests. I find that just standard blood work is actually much more effective at trying to figure out what's going on in the body and dealing with the body as a whole, and looking at your liver and your digestive system and your immune system and fixing those. And then that way you're healing in a better way than just trying to supplement with bioidentical hormones. Let's get into healing these hormones imbalance, these perimenopause symptoms, including anxiety and panic attacks. All right, let's get into the foods that heal your perimenopause symptoms, including anxiety and panic attack. Best way to balance your adrenal hormones and therefore your sex hormones is to put in a combination of sodium, potassium, and sugar in the form of a snack. And when you do that and you eat throughout the day, it's going to balance your adrenals and help you balance your blood sugar and help you just start feeling better. Well, this might look like a date for potassium, 2 celery sticks for sodium, and an apple for sugar. You can also do half an avocado for potassium, spinach for sodium, and an orange for sugar. And the last one that I love is a sweet potato for potassium, parsley for sodium, and a little bit of kale with some lemon on it for sugar. You want to eat these anywhere from every 1 hour to every 3 hours. Again, to balance your blood sugar, to balance your mood, if you're having swinging ups and downs. All right, and if you need a little bit more support than just in the information I'm giving you in this video, check out my anxiety and depression recovery guide in the description and this comments below. There I give you everything you need to get started on this healing journey. I give you tips, tricks, and recipes. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the foods you want to remove. We've talked about this a little bit, but let's remove caffeine. As much as possible, you want to take caffeine, because again, you're just revving the engine and maybe there's not enough fuel in the engine, or again, maybe you're flooding it. Either way, you want to make sure that there's not too much caffeine inadvertently driving adrenaline for you and killing your adrenal glands. So the other thing you want to watch out for is a high-fat diet. So if you're doing carnivore, keto, a lot of animal protein, a lot of nuts and seeds, you can be doing vegan and have a high-fat diet. So if you're doing any of those things, you want to reduce your fat. And the reason is because it makes your blood very thick, and it makes it really hard for your liver to work, basically. So that blood, every drop of blood goes through your liver in order to get cleaned, in order to make hormones, break down hormones, to make nutrients, get rid of nutrients. And so that thick blood makes your liver's job harder. And the other thing is that thick blood, what happens is it creates a more drive for adrenaline. So eating a high-fat diet will lead to excess adrenaline in order to thin the blood to get it into your brain. So it's best to not eat so much high-fat diet, to reduce the nuts and seeds, reduce the animal protein. And the other foods to remove, or food styles, are to do any kind of skipping meals, 1 meal a day, intermittent fasting. Again, this is really hard on your body because you need to balance. You need that constant potassium, sodium, and sugar in your bloodstream in order to balance your hormones. All right, let's talk about supplements. So there's a lot of great supplements that are more foundational to help you balance your hormones. I love the adaptogenic herbs, which are great because whether your adrenaline is too high or too low, these adaptogens bring it to the middle. That's its job, is to adapt it, is to help balance those hormones. And so I love ashwagandha, I love lemon balm, and rhodiola. The other supplements I like to bring in are B vitamins. I love a B complex is really helpful to help you balance the stress, to help you methylate well. And then the other thing is not just a B complex, but a very high dose sublingual form of B12. Now there's 3 types of B12 that I like. There's adenosine, methyl, and hydroxy. And you want one or a combination of all of those forms in order to get your levels you need, right? So there's so much stress and our nervous systems are under so much attack. So in order for you to help reduce that anxiety, you're going to need a lot of B12. And when you test for B12, it might show that you're really high, but ignore that because that's not really what your body needs, right? So if you're dealing with anxiety and panic attacks, you need a lot of B12 to bring that back down to a normal, healthy level. 2 more supplements that I like. One is magnesium, and I like a magnesium glycinate. It's very calming. Glycine is also the precursor to glutathione, so that's going to help. And most people are deficient in magnesium. So anytime there's anxiety or panic attacks, you want every calming nutrient you can have in there, and that's magnesium glycinate. And the last one is taurine. So taurine is really important for your liver. It's an important part of detoxification, and it's very grounding. It's a very grounding amino acid. All right, that's it. Before we recap, if you're loving what you're seeing, please give me a thumbs up. It really helps me. It helps my channel grow, helps me get out to more people. And if you like seeing my content and you want to see more every week, then subscribe to my channel so that you can see every video as it's released. Let's recap. So as we talked about, the symptoms of perimenopause are a little bit deceiving. They're not necessarily just tied to your hormones. They're more global than that. They're tied not just to your sex hormones, but to your adrenal hormones and your thyroid hormones. Most of these perimenopause symptoms came about in the past 100 years when our world has become much more polluted, much more stressful. It's really important to look out for your adrenal glands, right? To make sure that you don't have too much or too much adrenaline or too little adrenaline. Make sure you don't have too much cortisol and too little cortisol. It's important if you have viruses to get a handle on those viruses, because those viruses are the things that are going to throw off your thyroid hormone and prevent you from releasing T3 and T4, which are going to help you with temperature control, fatigue, dry skin, and listlessness. We talked a little bit about the risks of hormone replacement and how what's really happening with the hormone replacement is that they're putting in a steroid, which is making you feel better because it's suppressing your immune system, but it's not necessarily resolving your symptoms at the root cause. We talked about a lot of causes of your perimenopause symptoms, things like heavy metals, hormone disrupting toxins like plastics and DDT, viruses, caffeine, unsupportive diet, stress, and nutrient deficiencies. We talked a little bit about testing, hormone testing, and how it can be true but partial, and that just looking at regular blood work might actually give you a better picture of what's going on. We talked about some healing foods, some adrenal snacks that you can have and eat more frequently. And we talked about the detriment of skipping meals, intermittent fasting, high-fat diets, and things like that. And we talked about some key supplements to help really balance your adrenals, therefore balancing your sex hormones. And that's it for today. I'd love to know your thoughts. If you have any comments, if you have any questions, please share them in the comments below, and I'll see you next week. Thanks so much.